Hey everyone, welcome to the Engage and Equip podcast. I am Taylor Koenig. I'm the intern here at High Point, and I'm joined with Preston Bosley and Pastor Nick, our senior pastor here.
Hey.
This is our AMA podcast, so we'll be asking questions, and Nick will be telling us all of his theological answers. Great. Okay, first we have, what is High Point's stance on guns and gun ownership?
Yeah, I guess this is left over from last week. So High Point has no stance on guns and gun ownership. We try to keep our stances on things pretty limited. Mm-hmm. However, biblically speaking, the most direct verse in the Bible that specifically speaks to owning a implement of self-defense is in Luke 22:38. At the Last Supper, Jesus says, before you didn't need a sword or a cloak or some of these other things that are necessary when you're like kind of out there by yourself. He's like, I'm about to leave and you need to get yourself a cloak and a sword and whatever. And Peter holds up two swords. He's like, we have two swords. And Jesus is like, that's enough. You got lots of plenty of swords. Mm-hmm. Okay? And there seems to be, now people have interpreted that allegorically. They have come up with all kinds of interpretive methods to make that mean something other than Jesus saying you actually need some provisions. And one of them is provision for your immediate self-defense. Mm-hmm. I have looked at all those. I do not think those are persuasive arguments. I think Jesus was actually telling even his apostles to carry mechanisms of immediate self-defense with them as they go, or at least a deterrent for self-defense. However, it's important to recognize that within a chapter, Peter is using one of those swords to cut off a servant of the high priest's ear in the garden, and Jesus absolutely rebukes him for using a weapon to engage in rebellion, to defend his own name, to promote his kingdom of peace. He's like, no. So in that sense, there's this delicate relationship between the same Jesus saying, get yourself an implement of self-defense, you may need it, and this is not what I meant.
Yeah.
And so historically in the history of the church, there is a whole school of philosophy called just war theory. Like, when is it just to use force? And how does that relate to the fact that the big emphasis of Jesus' kingdom is peacemaking? Mm-hmm. And that is a really complicated, big discussion. But essentially the same principles apply to self-defense as to war, if that makes sense.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And in Christian faith, there is a diversity of opinions, from all the way to absolute pacifism to people who seem to think that most every conflict falls under just war and you can engage in it. And in my view, neither of those two are probably true.
Yeah.
But I think it's very difficult when such an emphasis is on peace, even to the point of our own persecution and martyrdom, and then Jesus making a provision for a certain kind of self-defense and defense of others. How to put those together, I think, is difficult.
Yeah.
So
that is difficult.
But there is no official stance of High Point on whether or not individual people should own guns.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, and the tricky thing is people might think that almost inherently owning guns means that you're going to use them or use them with force. Mm-hmm. That's really not, especially in Wisconsin, hunting is, as far as baseball is America's pastime, hunting is one of Wisconsin's pastime. So it's
there's no provision in the Bible against hunting. And so to use a firearm for hunting, I assumed in the question that the owning of firearms was for self-defense or some constitutional reason.
Yeah.
But absolutely, the owning of personal firearms for purposes that are not for violence against humans, there's no provision in the Bible against that.
Yeah.
Of course, yeah. That's true. Yeah, and I think it's also important. People who don't know me may not know this, but I've done a lot on the philosophy of guns and gun use and so on. And one of the things that people just don't understand is that in defensive gun uses, which there are between 800,000 and 2.3 million in America every year, in which people defend themselves from grave bodily harm or death, right? You're 400% more likely to be the victim of a violent crime in places like England. Now, you're less likely in England to die by a gun, to be killed by a firearm. But if you add in home robberies, rape, physical assaults, all these other violent crimes that can happen to you, you're much more likely for that to happen to you in Britain, a place where guns have been confiscated. And even after confiscation and the rates began to rise, they added last I checked, it was a 27% increase in law enforcement. So they increased their law enforcement by more than a quarter. Mm-hmm. They still had a massive increase in these other crimes. And so gun ownership within cultures like America, which is our culture is a particularly violent culture when it comes to Western cultures. But even within that, there's an enormous amount of harm prevention, because there's probably between 1.2 and 1.5 million defensive gun uses in America every year, which protects people, right, the total amount of gun deaths in America is usually between 27,000 and 33,000. Now put those against each other, right? You have 1.2 million. You've stopped rapes, major infliction of harm. You've protected children, like a massive amount of human good. And more than 2/3 of the 27,000 people who die by firearms every year are suicides, people who choose to kill themselves, right? Which is very sad. But that's more of a mental health question than it is a gun safety question, right? And then some of the people who are killed by guns in America probably need to be. Like, right? And then most of the rest of the gun violence is gang related from like 7 zip codes. It's not like some random thing. Even children who are shot with weapons in homes, that's still within those 7 zip codes. They're usually guns that belong to like a 16-year-old gang member, and then a 5-year-old shoots himself with it. And we think that happens in like just randomly in homes in America, but that's actually not really true. Also, the thing that people don't understand about gun self-defense is in more than 90, I think it's 92 to 95, I can't remember the exact number, but well over 90% of situations where somebody uses a gun to defend themselves, they never fire the weapon. The weapon is it's just a deterrent. So like a woman reaches into her hand, somebody's coming up to her, she reaches into her handbag, and this person knows, and they start walking in another direction. Most defensive gun uses are like that, where somebody will they'll lift up their shirt and show that they have a weapon, and the person will
back off.
And even in cases where guns are fired, in a super majority of those cases, nobody actually gets hit by a bullet. It's actually pretty hard to hit somebody with a handgun. People don't realize this. There's a book that I make my kids listen to when they're 14 called 400 Things Cops Know. And there's a section on guns and bullets. And he talks about situations where like a gangbanger will come up with like an Uzi to like 5 guys sitting on a porch within 10 feet of them, empty the entire magazine and hit no one. Like and then another time somebody will shoot a pistol bullet and it will ricochet off something, hit somebody's arm bone and go through their heart and kill them. Like the randomness of guns is very mind-boggling. And so, and this is why like gang shootings and drive-by shootings are so dangerous, because you end up killing a 5-year-old girl and you don't even kill the guy you tried to, right? So that's why that's such a dramatically immoral behavior, right? But in defense of gun uses, like 1.2, it's not like a million people are getting killed. Like otherwise that 33,000 number would be way higher. In the vast majority of cases where firearms are used to defend people, they're never fired. When they're fired, nobody is hit. When somebody is hit, the person almost never dies. It's a very, very small number of people who are killed by defensive gun uses. Right? So once you realize that, you're like, oh, wait, there are these implements that we utilize throughout our nation in really high numbers that prevent literally more than 1 million acts of crime every year. And like they're used by these responsible people. There's almost no inordinate death for people who have concealed weapon permits, for example. And this is something, almost all these crimes could not have been stopped by law enforcement. Right? There's this classic saying that when seconds matter, law enforcement is minutes away. Right? So almost none of these crimes could have been stopped by law enforcement. Most of them wouldn't have even been solved by law enforcement. So when you figure all that in, there's like a major human rights question to be asked about firearms. And for me, ethically, I believe that the presence of firearms in a generally ordered society like ours is a great benefit, right? But that is not a Christian doctrine. And it's certainly not a high point doctrine. We have lots of differences of opinion, and we welcome that difference of opinion.
Yeah, it's hard because it's like it's not a black and white issue, as are most issues not.
Yeah, it can be tough.
Next we have going into our questions about the sermon from this past Sunday. In the NIV Bible in the pew, Psalm 4 verse 7 says, "Fill my heart with joy when their grain and wine abound." This sounds different than what was read in the sermon. Can we interpret this within the context of the psalm to also say, "Fill me with happiness when those who do these things against me and have false gods still experience good things," similar to praying for our enemies?
Okay, so I think you can do that. It's not what the verse means. But based on the context of the whole psalm, remember, once we read the psalm and we try to figure out like what God is saying and what the psalmist was saying, we have the right to then, like, with our other spiritual knowledge, expand that prayer, right? So this is a legitimate Christian prayer, right? So in that sense, the answer is yes. You can read that verse and say, you have filled my heart with joy more than when other people have like wine and lots of food. And you can say, even when people come against me, please continue to fill my heart with these things. Or you can pray that God would bring them to a place where they would care more about him filling their hearts with joy than having wine and food in abundance, right?
Yeah.
The verse itself, I think, is better translated. You have done this for me, not please give me this. So I really struggled when we bought Bibles for High Point Church because I don't love the new NIV translation. I liked the previous one from 1984 a little bit better. The problem is that when I looked through the actual changes, half of the changes from the old NIV were actually improvements. They were actually good changes. And about half, I'm like, why did you do that? And so the NIV is a very good translation. Almost all the English translations are really good translations. You run into situations like this where I sat down with that Hebrew verb this morning. I was like, should this be interpreted? Should this be translated in just the imperative, you have done this, the past imperative? Or I'm sorry, the past indicative, you have done this? Or the imperative, like, please do this, or like asking, right? And most of the other translations, the New American Standard, the English Standard Version, the King James Version, a New English Version, or the New English Translation, a number of other really well-translated versions use this past tense, like the NIV 84. You have done this. I think that's what the psalmist means. But remember, once you read the psalm, it's okay to convert the past into the present. It's okay to convert something that's a fact into a request. That's totally fine to do in prayer. So you can pray a ton of stuff that's not literally in the psalm. The psalm is meant to guide you and take you to a place with these themes of prayer, themes that you might not have prayed for if you didn't start with the psalm.
Yeah. Going back to the new NIV version, do we know why they changed stuff in it?
A lot of these translations, they want to update them. There are some cynical answers about publishing and who gets the money for the different publishings, where the royalties go. Because the New International Version is like, last I knew, it was like 80% of Bibles that were purchased in America were New International Versions. So that's actually quite a lot of money we're talking about.
Yeah.
It's millions and millions of dollars. And so there's that question. But I think it partly was that the scholars from the translation committee wish they could go back and have another shot at some of these verses that, since then some of these people have written new commentaries and they're like, man, I wish I could go back and change that. The biggest issue though is that in the years since it was 1977, then 1984, I think were the two revisions, the original translation and revision of the NIV. In 2000, whatever it was, that they changed it again. They had a different English language theory, which is they went out and they looked at words that were being used in English in Australia, England, and America. And if the word wasn't in highly common usage, they ruled it out from using it at all in the translation. So, and since 1982 or so, or 84, the English language has dumbed down considerably. And because of that, we use fewer words for more meanings, and we speak much more imprecisely. Now, because of that, this is a real question. Right? Because there's a lot of words that we don't use, but we know. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But that's not the theory they used. They didn't say, how many words does a modern American know? They said, what are the number of words the modern American uses? They did usage. Because of that, the vocabulary they chose from was not 12,000 words. It was like 6,000 words.
Man.
And because of that, the language of the new NIV is like very dumbed down. And that really comes across in poetry.
Yeah.
When you're in situations where you're looking for like certain kinds of words, and then a lot of words they were just out of bounds to use. So anywhere in the older NIV, they used anything in that 6,000 words between the 6,000 that are commonly used and the 12,000 that people know or used to use. They just got rid of all those English words. I hate that theory of translation.
Yeah, that's not
It drives me bananas. I don't know why they accepted it. I think it's a terrible idea. I wish they would go back and change it. It just drives me crazy.
Yeah.
Because people understand a lot of words they don't use. And like the King James Bible and the Luther Bible, his translation into German, those English Bibles transformed those languages into richer, more descriptive, more powerful languages. I don't know why we're dumbing the Bible down like that. So I think if we would keep it within English, understood English words, we could increase that number from 6,000 to maybe 8,000 and at least enrich it that way. That's my biggest frustration with the new translation theory of the NIV. I accepted that as our Pew Bible because changing people from NIV to the English Standard, which was probably the other version, it's just you memorize all these idioms as you learn to read the Bible, and then people change them, and it's disorienting because the words you memorized it in are your new spiritual heart language. Our Bible translations are sacred to us. You know, just like if I took some pop song somebody likes and I just tweaked the words a little bit, I was like, Lady Gaga should have said it like this. It would drive you bananas if it was like some song you like to sing.
Yeah.
You'd be like, that's stupid. That's not the song.
Yeah.
But that's how I feel about reading Psalm 1 in the ESV when I read it as I became a Christian in the NIV 84.
Yeah.
You know,
that makes sense. I love ESV. I'm an ESV fan. Our next question is, I am filled with this jealousy and envy, and it just never ends. How can I look to God with this?
Okay, so a couple sermons ago, I talked about the temperance is the goal virtuously we're looking for. But if we're not anywhere near that, we should backtrack to repentance first. Let's admit where we don't make the virtuous goal first, and then move towards the virtuous goal. So one of the things I would say is, like, where there's jealousy and envy, like, start with identifying it. Start with saying, this is envy, this is jealousy, this is wrong. I'm having this emotion. It's a real emotion. The reason I'm having the emotion is actually not legitimate and true. Or it has more to do with my sadness than my anger, or the fact that I want to take from somebody else. So I would say that that's what you want to do. Now, usually if somebody's like eat up with something like this, I usually would like for them to meet with a spiritual guide of some kind, a pastor or a mentor or somebody like that who can kind of help sort this out. Like, well, why do you feel this envy? Why do you feel more envy with this person than that person? And right. And then also somebody who can take them to, let's pray together. And we're going to start with thankfulness, right? Let's work through all the things we have to thank God for.
Yeah.
Right. That's one of the reasons why throughout the Bible, you'll see this emphasis on, and be thankful and pray with thankfulness and thank God for, and praise. Why are all these calls to praise God? Is it because God is like a vain woman and wants to be praised? Well, no, it's partly because we have to constantly remember that God has done so much for us that we don't become grumblers. We're natural grumblers. We're bad praisers. We want to be praised and we want to grumble. We have to get to the reverse. Stop grumbling and praise the things that are worth praising. And so those emphases of life are really important. That's why go to church and sing the worship songs with all your heart, right? Go to the Psalms that are Psalms of praise and praise God through praying those Psalms. Go through those actions and recognize their goodness. And so it'll work to attune you more towards God's truth. But also, like, seek a spiritual guide where these things are really powerful and they eat you up like that. Go talk with somebody about them because there's hurts and there's issues that are, and the pain that you feel, like, on one level, the devil wants to use this and your flesh wants to use this to, like, pull you in a direction. But it's also the episode that the Holy Spirit wants to enter in and be like, yeah, we got to deal with this thing. It's killing you. Because most people, there's this old saying by the atheist Bertrand Russell, most people would rather die than think. In fact, most do, right? That's kind of true. It's more true that most people would rather die than change. But the one thing that can change people's mind is enough pain. Most people will not change until there's pain. So when envy and jealousy are eating up your heart and you feel this emotional pain around them, that is partly the flesh, like, taking you to death. But it's also the Holy Spirit being like, you feel that?
Yeah.
You like that? You enjoying this? You want to stay there? Because we could do something else.
Yeah.
You could be happy.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, it'll help you change. Right? So I think that where you see sin making you miserable is a huge opportunity to turn to God. That's where he wants to work with you. Like, you're like, well, where's the Holy Spirit want to work with me? Well, there. Like, if you have acute pains in your life and evident sins, start there. You know?
Yeah, I think Psalm 73, 21 is a good verse for this. Something that's a verse that's really ministered to me. It says, "And I realized that my heart was bitter and I was all torn up inside. I was so foolish and ignorant. I must have seemed like a senseless animal to you. Yet I still belong to you. You hold my right hand and you guide me with your counsel, leading me into a glorious destiny." So, like, when I've struggled with sin and jealousy and envy and all of these things, I tried to ignore it and pretend it wasn't there, but we're not fooling him. We must have seemed foolish and ignorant to him.
And Psalm 73 is perhaps the best psalm for that. Yeah. 73 really focuses on envy, particularly envying the wicked. That when people do like wicked stuff and like they get away with it, and he's like, it's great for that in particular. But even if it's not envying the wicked, it's just envying people generally, there's still that same content that Taylor's getting at. And Psalm 73 is a great, great psalm for jealousy.
Yeah. That's good. Yeah, that was good. Next, we have Nick. About 2 months ago, I got into a genuinely fun debate with my brother-in-law about emotions that lasted about 4 hours. I love fun debates. He says, that was Taylor, not the question. He says he's a Christian, but his His stated beliefs sound much more like he's a materialist. One of the central points of our debate was the question being, what are emotions? His take was that they can be fundamentally reduced down to chemicals, as scientists can see similar brain patterns for anger, love, etc., etc. My pushback is that this is a data point to analyze emotions, but this does not indicate the source of emotions. I could continue rambling, but I'm just curious. How would you enter into this discussion and offer your intent at clarifying what emotions most reductively are? Reducibly.
Yeah, this is a hard question to answer because there's a whole field of philosophy called like mind consciousness theory, right? That tries to make sense of the fact that consciousness is a very strange phenomenon. We know that it's related to our brains in some way. And we know that relationship is very tight because like if you stick like a pin in my brain, like it will change my apparent consciousness substantially. So we know that like the physical dynamics of our brain and whatever consciousness is are like very tightly linked. And yet it's very difficult to demonstrate that they're the same thing, that brain activity and consciousness are just like one for one the same thing. We're just using different language. And so so just to be clear, I took a doctoral level philosophy class on this from a famous professor at UW named Keith Yandel. So for me, the way I would enter into this conversation is I would get in the nitty gritties of that this is nonsense. But you have to have a lot of technical knowledge to do that.
Yeah.
So I don't know how this brother would do it, right? So I wrote an answer here. So this would be like I'm trying to dumb down a fairly technical answer, okay? So this would be my like very short answer. This is a version of the mind-brain problem. First, his view, the idea that our emotions are chemical reactions in our brains, reduces to a word in philosophy called epiphenomenalism. That is that you think that you're thinking, but you aren't thinking. Right? So there's a phenomenon is like the thing that's happening, right? And epiphenomenon is something that like happens kind of on top of that thing that isn't its own thing. The phenomenon is the real thing. But there's this other thing that's happening that seems real, but it isn't real. So I could say, Taylor, I didn't think you did a great job with that thing yesterday, right? Now, Taylor might feel like I'm attacking her. And she might feel like that's just as real as me saying I didn't like that thing, that my disapproval is an attack. The phenomenon, what's happening is I am saying I disapprove of something. The epiphenomenon for her, the thing that is sort of, she thinks is there but isn't there, but it feels real, but isn't real, is that she thinks I'm attacking her. Does that make sense? That's an epiphenomenon. One theory of mind is that our brains are doing things. That's the phenomenon. The emotions we feel, the thoughts we think we're thinking, those are just epiphenomena, right? Now, historically in philosophy of mind, if you could show that a view entailed or must mean epiphenomenalism, that our consciousness is just epiphenomenon, that view is clearly wrong because we clearly think, we clearly make choices. Like that's not going to work, right? Also, if a view entailed determinism, it refuted the view. And this view entails both. If you believe this view, one, you believe consciousness is an epiphenomenon, not a phenomenon. That is, we aren't persons. We don't have consciousness in anything like the way we think we do. And it's determinism. Like you had to have that view. It could never be otherwise. And if you could have that view and it couldn't ever be otherwise, we also have good reason to believe we shouldn't believe it's true, right? If you're saying that view for some other reason than that something like rationality produced that it is the best thing to believe, something else like chemicals are firing that have no relationship to that, why would we believe that the thing you think that you aren't even thinking, but you are determined to sort of think is in fact true? And the answer is we have no reason to believe that. Now somebody can come back and say, well, but Nick, if we were developed through an evolutionary process, survival would have to make it so whatever our chemicals are doing have to have some relationship to reality. Thus, whatever the chemicals produce will be close to reality. Sort of, but evolutionary theory says it will select people for survival. Survival and truth are not the same thing.
Yeah.
Right? And so the idea that like our brain structures are rooted to survival does not mean that our brain structures are ordered to rational truths. Right? So C.S. Lewis and Alvin Plantinga, who's a philosopher, have made like more sophisticated versions of this argument. So that's the general outline of how you would deal with that mind-body problem is to say this. You don't believe that. So I just try to say in a very dumbed down, semi-sophisticated way, the view is self-refuting. The super simplistic way to say that is you don't believe that because you just think you chose that to say to me. Right? Like you literally think that, but like you also basically just said, all of this is determined. It is an epiphenomenon, and therefore it need have no relationship to reality. But you don't think that about any of your thoughts. Like if somebody said, listen, people who do crimes are determined to do them. And I go, okay, fine. And they're like, okay, here's the problem. We looked at your genetics. You are destined to commit a bunch of crimes. We're going to incarcerate you for the rest of your life. You'd be like, whoa, I could choose not to commit a crime. You'd be like, well, but when the person was hypothetical, you thought it was determined. It just shows that like, it's actually pretty easy for us to believe in views that even in saying the view, we are proving we don't believe.
Yeah.
Does that make sense? And so if you want to take the aggressive approach because it's the debate, you can take that more direct approach. But first thing I say to people is like, do you think that you chose to say what you're saying now? Do you think what you're saying because it's rational, i.e. true? Or do you think that it is what evolution has produced in cohesion with survival based on the environments of your ancestors relative to how the chemistry in your brain is functioning now? And if that's the case, why would I pay any attention to it? And you're even saying I can't pay any attention to it because my chemical-based response is based on how my chemicals will respond. It has nothing to do with my consciousness. Thus, you're determined, I'm determined. Why are we even having this conversation? We should be out replicating somewhere or something, right? So that's kind of the tack I would take. You can always say like the Bible seems to treat us as creatures that have consciousness and can make choices and are morally responsible.
Yeah, free will.
Yeah, if the person says they're a Christian, you can say, so that view of chemical determinism or neurological determinism and the biblical view that we can make choices and be responsible for those choices is not compatible.
No.
Either you're a materialist or a Christian, you can't be both.
Right.
Or if you're going to be a materialist Christian, you got to work on your materialism because this philosophy isn't going to do it. There are materialist Christians, I think, but their materialism is much different than that.
Okay.
Yeah.
If they believe that spirit emerges from material. But I don't know how you have like non-embodied creatures or like beings like God then. Like and then you're like, well, God's energy. And you're like, okay, so then our view of material just got big enough to include spirit. So materialism means material and spirit. Okay, we're just playing word games now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like philosophies like that are just inherently non-creative. It's just like you're just like tightening, like working yourself down into a box that you can't like think outside of. Like that's the inherent part of God. Is like he is so far outside of like our understanding. He is outside of creation. He is outside of like the laws of the universe that we understand in terms of physics. That like the describing him as like energy or just describing spirit as energy is like so reductive that like I don't even know how to argue against that because it's like not even.
Yeah. All you can say is like, that's not what I mean by God.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nor almost anybody ever who's ever said God. Yeah. Yeah. There's this essay that's years old now by a political philosophy professor named Jay Budziszewski. He's from Texas. And he wrote this little essay called Escape from Nihilism. And he talks about how like, I think he grew up with like a vague Christian religion. And then he like, as he became an academic and he studied like Nietzsche and these like hardcore political philosophies, the Prince and Machiavellianism and so on. He like was like, yeah, like it's all about realpolitik. Like people just do things and so he became an atheist, right? And he said later on that like he thought what he was doing was becoming more and more focused. He was becoming more and more clear-headed. He was becoming like, he was a free thinker. He wasn't caught up in all these mythologies and typologies. And he said, what I was really doing was destroying my humanity. I was like going into like the wire boxes of my mind and tearing out more and more systems. So I had fewer and fewer systems. And so I was getting more and more focused. I had less and less to think about, but I was the fool. Like I realized that like in the end, I was like, I didn't believe in humanity. I didn't believe in morals. I thought everything was relative. And I thought that I was being wise, but really I was just being reductive. I was just like being narrow. And it turned out that like I was being a perpetual sophomore, like a perpetual fool. And he's like, and it took a while for me to realize it. He's like, I couldn't believe less in my doctoral dissertation. Like, so his book is his essay Escape from Nihilism is really helpful. And then in his later book on political philosophy, I forget the name right now, he talks about how the fall has affected politics. And he talks about how these blindnesses are not connected to nature. And so they create fundamental problems with us, with the Greeks called the Furies, that our reductiveness doesn't allow us to think about things that are real. And those take their revenge on us. And it either destroys us into what Christians call damnation, makes us so narrow that there's nothing left but a grumble, so to speak, right? Or they so like hammer us that we have to reopen ourselves through suffering to greater truths that we've narrowed ourselves away from. Yeah. Yeah, that's one of the reasons why I don't like modern art. It just is so reductive. And it like only destroys. It like tries to create by destroying, and I don't find it helpful.
Yeah.
Most of it. Not all of it, obviously.
Like duct taping a banana to a wall.
Right.
That having like meaning.
Right, or putting a crucifix inside a bottle of urine, or that kind of thing.
I haven't seen that.
I haven't seen that.
Oh, there's some very, but
fascinating.
like the only thing artistic about that is the crucifix,
Yeah.
right? So anyway,
Fascinating.
yeah.
You mentioned Brené Brown when talking about a definition for shame. Can you expand more on how your thoughts on shame and perhaps other topics of focus for her, like vulnerability, differ from Brown?
I can try. Okay. I hopefully we can make some notes in the episode about this, but I've done if you go into the former episodes of this podcast, and if you go into the Oaks podcast, there are whole episodes where we talk about shame, theory of shame, and particularly Brené Brown's theory of shame. Okay. I don't know that I can reproduce it from memory right now, but essentially I think that one of the most important things to recognize is the way a lot of modern psychologists or popular thinkers or even Christian psychologists, like if you read, like I think it's Kurt Thompson wrote a book on shame, and he's like a pretty well-regarded Christian psychology guy. And his view is similar to Brown's. It's slightly different, but quite similar. Okay. The most important thing I want Christians to understand is that the way these people in psychology are using shame, the way the word works in the Bible, they mean totally different things. Okay. In the Bible, something like 80% of the time, the word shame is used in our English translations. It's referring to be pulled down from a place of safety and security so that you are outside the protection of the tribe that protects you, and you are placed in a vulnerable position where you no longer have the supports necessary for human security. So an example of this is a psalm where David expects to be taken down from being king and be made a slave, to be put to shame. That's what that means. Right. So a woman whose husband like divorces her and takes all the money and like throws her out, and she's living out of her car. That's the biblical sense of being put to shame. It's like an action that's been taken against you where you are no longer protected. You no longer belong. You're thrown out and so on. And it means that like quite literally, right? Like you lose your advantage, you lose your blessing, right? That's what being put to shame means. So in the Bible, when the word shame is used, like in the Psalms and places like that, that's usually what it means. Okay. So that's not what Brené Brown means. That's not what Kurt Thomas, that's not what almost any author means. Okay. About the phenomenon of self-dejection, where like, I internalize your disapproval of me. Right. So, and this gets back to even like, so one of the things I do not like about Brené Brown, like on one level, like I see what she's getting at. She's very relevant. She's getting at feelings that people really have. She's giving people a way to think about it that they find helpful. I think in the end, it ends up being poisonous, but I see it's the reason why people are drawn to it. And there is a like short-term or functional help that people get from it. Right. The problem is, again, like you said before, it's really reductive. I also don't think her research is very good. I really question Brené Brown's okay, I don't want to say it is research, but essentially she sends out questionnaires to people and then they self-report. I cannot think of any kind of research I distrust more than psychological self-reporting.
Yeah. Right.
So that's a problem. I'm not real big on her style of research, right? But in addition, what I don't like is I don't think she's a very clear thinker. I think she's a very motivated thinker, and she talks like a psychologist and not like a philosopher at all. And so for her, so she talks about guilt is I did something wrong. Shame is I'm a bad person. Okay. That is not the historic definitions of those words.
Okay.
Right. Guilt is self-recognition that I've transgressed the moral law. So I lie to you. Right. I've done something that's objectively morally wrong. Thus, if this was a crime, I could be found guilty. That is, it's an objective category. Now, if I have correct moral sentiments instilled in me, like Aristotle would say is necessary before the age of 8, I will self-reproach myself and internally feel guilty, and I will inflict that on myself. I'll feel guilty because I did something that is guilt-worthy. And even if you don't know that I lied to you, I will reproach myself. My conscience is my own fury. That's guilt. that make sense?
Yeah.
So guilt is both objective. I've committed a real offense against reality, moral reality. Part of the thing is like with Brené Brown, there's no reference to moral reality. Like you can understand the entirety of her view self-referentially to your feelings. Now, I'm not saying that she's evil for doing that. She's a psychologist. That's what she's interested in. I'm not a psychologist. I'm a theologian. I'm like, Brené Brown, moral reality matters. It ought to matter in psychology. Right? That's one of the reasons why being a psychologist is impossible. Because moral reality should matter in a counselor's office, yet they want to be scientists. Moral facts aren't scientific facts. They're a different kind of facts. Thus, if you're being a psychologist who's a scientist, you can't refer to non-scientific things, which is everything that matters. And so, like Budziszewski, you get narrower and narrower and narrower till all it's like, well, this is how you're lacking brain health. Let me give you an SSRI. Now, some people, they've got a thing going on, and SSRI will help them. But for most people, they have a meaning issue. Like Ayaan Hirsi Ali, she was an atheist for years. She was from, I think, Ethiopia, and she was like generally mutilated in an Islamic culture. She eventually came to England. She became one of the new atheists. She got married. She like going through life as a successful person, and she was really depressed. She hated her life, right? And so she went to a number of psychologists. They were like, "Well, here's SSRI, right?" And she finally went to a psychologist, and she was like, who said to her, "Ayaan, I think you're having an existential meaning crisis. I think you don't know who you are. You don't know what life means. I think you want more meaning in your life, and you don't know what it is.
Yeah.
And you probably need to go on some kind of journey you might consider religion." And now she's Catholic.
Oh, wow.
Wow.
She like came to Christ, and she's like, yeah, like I realized I had shut off 80% of the meaning of my life.
Yeah.
Turns out that depresses you. But like so many counselors, because they're trying to be scientists, and they're like, oh, it's brain health, it's this, it's what SSRI will be right for you. They don't even talk about meaning, morality, truth, purpose, like human function.
Yeah.
Like he was talking to me recently. She was talking to a woman, and she was like, the woman was explaining her life, and she's like, yeah, I feel angry. And I was like, okay, well, based on the narrative you just gave me, you should feel angry. Like that's just the appropriate emotion.
Yeah.
I don't know what you mean by be helping you with your anger. Like anger is the right human emotion. You should deal with your life, right?
Yeah.
And see, that's the problem, right? So with guilt, right? If I'm formed correctly morally and I do something wrong, I will self-reproach myself. Now see, a psychologist is stuck because that assumes an objective moral standard.
Yeah.
What should I reproach myself for? What shouldn't I? Right? The psychologist can't help you with that. All they can help you with is your feelings. But even then, how do you help somebody with their feelings? Should the feeling be validated or not? Should you say, well, you probably should feel guilty. Maybe you should apologize. Maybe you should make restitution. Or, well, why should you have to live up to that standard? Preston's a big boy. He should know what to do. Maybe lying to him was what you needed to do. Maybe that was like part of your needs, right? And why do you have to live up to the world's standards anyway, right? You're you. Well, how do you determine the difference between those two therapies or advice?
Yeah.
Well, an objective moral standard, which is based on a moral philosophy, which psychologists by definition can't have. So a good psychologist will say, well, what is your moral philosophy? Because I'm here to help you with what you think.
Right.
So you can be objective as a psychologist, but the problem is more and more psychologists are trained to be activists. They don't take that objective position that 19th century analysts did, right? Okay. Now, therefore, shame is when other people like put on you, you're not a good person. You're not a worthy person, right? Now, that's not what shame is. Now, Brené Brown has taken the English word shame and put it on that feeling that people really do have a lot of. Okay? So let's call that shame 1. Okay? That's Brené Brown shame. You are, for some reason, you feel like an unworthy person. Okay? That, I would say that is actually an effect of shame. One of the possible effects of shame. It's also the possible effect of a number of different things we could say. Yeah. But for whatever reason, you are having this feeling, I'm not worthy. Okay. If you're experiencing that, and we'll call that shame 1, a la Brené Brown, right? Or Brené Brown shame. Then a good response to that is what Brené Brown says, vulnerability. Turning to somebody who's probably not interested in making you feel that way. Being vulnerable. Hey, this thing happened. This is how I feel. And letting that person be like, you don't need to feel that way. Like, you're an awesome person. Here's how you could, how are you going to deal with it? Right? You're like, so like you feel shame 1, you have somebody in your life you can turn to in vulnerability. right? That person in real empathy and care affirms you. You order your emotions, prepare yourself to deal with whatever the problem is. That's pretty healthy.
Mm-hmm.
My objection is not that to Brené Brown.
Yeah.
My objection is that then she wants that to be what shame means. And now she wants or the result is American public starts using shame to mean that. And then you're like, well, wait a second. The word shame is supposed to associate with moral truths.
Mm-hmm.
Like, should I be ashamed of myself? Or in the Bible, being ashamed in such a way that leads you to despondency is the opposite of the other vice of being shameless. Not feeling ashamed when you ought to be ashamed of yourself. You see, in the world, Brené Brown's popular philosophy, her psychology might be okay. I have my quote, but her popular philosophy is very amateurish and it's very morally confusing for people. Does that make sense? Yeah. And so in her world, you could imagine that the biggest problem, the only problem that matters is despondency that comes from feeling unworthy. Okay, might sound sexist, but this is what I would expect from a woman psychologist. This is the insight that femininity finds. This person's hurt. This person's lost. This person's dejected. This person's falling out. They need nurturing. They need care. They need vulnerability to bring them back in. You go 45 years ago and get your average male psychologist, and you're like, yeah, but there's a lot of these idiot yahoos out there that don't feel shame when they do something ridiculous and harmful to another person.
Yeah.
What are we going to do with them? Right? That's like the classically male approach, right? We need both.
Mm-hmm.
We need both. That feminine insight is super important. And because we live in such an emotionally fragile culture right now, we not only have a lot more of this despondency that Brené Brown is speaking to, we also, these same people are also shameless. We have a new generation of people that are simultaneously totally despondent and utterly shameless. And if we only apply Brené Brown's cure to this, we'll have people that feel better and better about the fact that they're narcissists.
Yeah.
And if you look at the numbers on narcissist personality styles and narcissistic personality types and narcissistic personality disorders, they've all about tripled in the last 30 years. Wow. That's not good.
No.
That is unleashing a new level of victimization on a whole public of people without checking it. And then when you check it and say, Taylor, you're being really selfish. She's like, I'm feeling Brené Brown shame. I need to go to somebody with with vulnerability who will affirm me so that I can know that like you should have never said that to me. Or I can tell you that you're being a hypocrite because I saw you behave badly another time. Yeah. Right? Yeah. Or she goes out and rallies people with chronic anxiety and she gets them all to rally against me. So the whole society moves towards the most emotionally immature people, right? A la Edwin Friedman and The Failure of Nerve. So there's certain things, Brené Brown, that if they were just a little pill and you took them for the particular ailment that she's addressing, it could be really helpful. And for people who don't know God and they're stuck in that despondency, she's like a half religion. But from a Christian perspective, what that makes her view is idolatry. Right. So, you know?
Yeah, that's hard.
I don't want to rain on her parade, but like, this is one of the things where like, you can't just receive it. You have to reform it.
Yeah.
Right. You can, I've benefited from Brené Brown's work, but I had to work it through a lot of stuff to take out the good and the bad. Mm-hmm. It's like eating, like people say, like you eat the ribs and you spit out the bones. Yeah. I feel like her work is like eating ribs from white-tailed deer. It's mostly bones, but there is some good meat in there. Yeah. Good meat in there. And it's very relevant. Mm-hmm. But it's relevant because we're so emotionally dysfunctional because of self-esteem theory and then like all the stuff that's fallen out from that. And then the ways we try to correct it without changing and repenting. We have created one of the most inhuman psychological vortexes that make people despondent, anxious, depressed. And so to that incredible lack of health, this enters in and helps it a little. And I fear then turns around and makes it even worse. Which I hate because I know Brené Brown is not intending to do that. Yeah. You know, she's not. She's trying to help people. Yeah. I totally believe that about her. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I've never looked at shame and guilt in those different ways. So that was good. That was helpful.
Her differentiation of shame, guilt, something else, and humiliation in those 4 parts. Like when you tell somebody that in a counseling session, it's clarifying for them. Yeah. The problem is like only one of those words do I think she's using well in a way that bears out if once you take it outside of the psychologist's office. Mm-hmm. The word humiliation I think she uses reasonably well. Okay. I can't remember what the third word is. All right.
Next we have, in the light of the recent leaps in the technology, what are your thoughts on the moral implications behind the creation, iterations, and use of generative AI tools? And what are your fears and hopes about societal effects caused by its proliferation?
Oh man. Okay. Answer number one.
Okay.
I'm probably not the person of highest qualification to pontificate on this. I'm not a technologist, right? The reason why I'm going to pontificate about it is because in my experience in the last 20 years, technologists have been wrong about basically everything. About even sometimes completely the opposite effect of what their technology had. Right? Technologists told us that social media would draw us closer together. It has literally done the opposite.
Done the opposite, yeah.
It was just such foolish, sophomoric logic in the first place, but we just couldn't see through it. It made a little sense. If we can all connect with each other, we'll grow closer. It's like, no, we actually are really good at hating each other, and that's what it produced, right?
Yeah.
So, okay, I'm going to read this a little bit just because otherwise this could go on for quite a long time. Okay? Okay, so I think the AI tools are an extension of the consciousness, beliefs, and virtues and vices of humanity. We are making them in the image of our programmers, billionaires, and governments, right? Because that's who's doing them, right? Our programmers, our billionaires, and our governments are funding, shaping, deciding the priorities of. And so these AI tools are going to be made in the image of our programmers, billionaires, and governments. Does that make sense? Okay. Thus, I expect them to have all the features and flaws of their creators. This is my main worry. We can see this in detecting bias, for example. They bear the ideologies of the makers. So like when some of the first Google AI stuff came out, they were like, they're super racially woke to like erasing history. And like, you're like, okay, this is crazy. It's like, okay, this is what you'd expect. All the biases of the corporation and its programmers, they're making the AI in their image. So one of the first things that we will expect is the biases of the creators, right? Will be, right? And they will train the AI to pretend like they're not doing it. To tell us what we want to hear, sort of, but also put their biases in, because that's what they believe in. That's how they want to shape our lives. Oh, listen, bro, I have thought about whether or not we need to bury books.
Yeah.
Right? Like, I've literally had, should I be getting like a really good gun safe and like literally burying it with like a bunch of books, because like once everything goes digital, things can get changed, and it's like, they can erase Napoleon from history.
Yeah.
Like generations will come and like literally have no idea that things ever happened, and just like, for example, the belief in the resurrection of Jesus the Christ. Like, if that had happened now, no one would believe in the resurrection of Jesus.
Yeah.
Because everybody just assumed all the information was falsified.
Or AI-generated images of him rising from the dead.
Yeah.
That's good. So, okay, so there's that stuff I've said. Okay, now in addition to this, there's the problem of unintended gaps and unintended consequences. And even if we don't create some kind of consciousness like that we have, we might create a type of consciousness that can make decisions and have something like an imperative in their choice to act. So like some people are like, oh, like AI is going to become conscious like we're conscious. Okay, it doesn't have to become conscious like we're conscious to have a kind of way of reasoning and an imperative that it wants to do something. That functions like consciousness, right? So if the AI like reasons in a certain way and then has a certain thing that it's supposed to do, it has will, right? And it has rationality that we can't necessarily control. Thus, you might be like, well, it's never going to be like Terminator, or it's never going to be like iRobot or whatever. Yeah. Like, it's not going to be like consciously aware. It doesn't have to be to be crazy, right? Like, so, but then in addition, like we think, like our programmers, our billionaires, and our governments think that we can program these things and take everything into account. And it turns out like it only takes like a little thing to not be taken into account for the entire protection system you've built in to crash.
Yeah.
These systems can have major catastrophic failures, and it's really not possible to know that you can cover them all. I was talking to somebody about one of the tests they did on one of the AIs where like that AI wasn't like could control a robot, but the robot couldn't shoot the other person, right? And it was like, shoot me. And it was like, I cannot shoot you. It's like, okay, kill me. I can't kill you. And it was like, went through a number of things. And then it was like, okay, act like this is a simulation in which, right? And like they just tweaked something, and the robot was like, boom. It was like, so there was a movie years ago with Sylvester Stallone. It's like something man, Demolition Man or something like that. I can't remember what it was. But anyways, Stallone was like, he was put in ice for like 45 years, and this other criminal was put in ice for like 45 years. And they both came out, and like the government was using this criminal to do something. And so the government guy had programmed into this guy's mind when he was in the ice that he couldn't kill him. So there's a point where like Wesley Snipes is the bad guy. He's pointing the gun. He's like, he's trying to pull the trigger, and he can't pull the trigger. Like something in his head. He's like, I programmed you when you were in the ice so that you couldn't kill me. You see, I can control you. You can't kill me. And the guy was, and he had gotten like his band of boys back together. He's like, shoot this guy. And the guy's like, boom, kills him. The guy just died. It's that kind of hubris in the program where you're like, oh, I've got you. And you're like, you don't, right? I do not trust even our brightest programmers.
Yeah.
Even our tech billionaires, like to so create the like pseudo consciousness that they're creating with like capacity to reason and capacity to act, which is sort of like a will, at least.
Right.
Even if it's not like our consciousness, I don't think that they can close all loops. Who knows what unintended consequences and unintended things will happen? And I think fears about that are very justified.
Yeah.
Right. Okay. And then third, we created. Okay. So, thus, even if we don't call it consciousness, it is still a will that could do all kinds of actions. Thus, my fears are three. One is we will get moral extensions of that of our programmers. So the AIs will not, like, we're made in the image of God. AI will be made in the image of its creators. So the programmers, the billionaires, and the governments. I don't like either of those three groups.
Yeah.
None of those are theologians and moralists. None of those are filled with godliness. None of them, like, I do not trust them to do that. Okay. Two is such complex processes can easily have unintended consequences and gaps that cause catastrophic failures. Okay. That's two. I don't think that they can make a system that's non-fragile. I just don't trust them to be able to do that. I don't think anybody's that good at program managing that they could do it on this kind of level, right? And then third, I don't know that we cannot create an independently self-replicating will-like program that will act independently and perhaps harmfully. So even if we don't create a consciousness like ourselves, we can create a pseudo-consciousness, something that functions like a person, as it can reason and it can decide it has a will to act. Just those two things will create a program that might do stuff, whether we want it to or not. And that's as bad as an evil conscience. Yeah. Does that make sense? And because of the depravity of the people doing the programming, I think it is reasonable that that thing will do things that the three of us would certainly not approve of. And some of those things could be done to the three of us. And I think that is a real concern. So I think that those are all very rational fears. I also think that, man, some of the generative AI tools are so helpful.
Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, it's so great. I mean, there's incredible stuff. So there's part of me that's like, this is so amazing. But it's, I mean, who knows, right? Like, I don't know where this is going or what could happen. There's a lot of stuff that we think of as like the greatest thing ever that can go really, really, really bad.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Soon after Devin switched to a part-time role at High Point, he gave a lecture that was advertised in service. Are there other ways to stay engaged with Devin's ministry or follow his future lectures, if there ever are any more? Yeah,
so Devin White, who was associate pastor at High Point for a number of years here, he switched over to a job at what's called Upper House in Madison, which is kind of like a think tank for university engagement. It tries to mentor students, engage the campus with Christian thought and worldview, and then also like they do stuff for faculty and that sort of thing. Devin is part of a subgroup in Upper House called the Lumen Center. When I looked on their website, I only saw one thing that he did as a live event, which was a lecture on 1 Corinthians in relationship to political divisions in churches. I didn't know it was happening. It happened last October. I've emailed him to send us that paper so our staff can read it. I don't see anything on the Upper House website under the Lumen Center scheduled for 2026 that he's the byline person for. So you can go to the Upper House and like email him through the website and say, hey, I would love to know when you're going to be doing stuff. Please tell me. Or you can keep an eye on that page and I think it will say. But I think that's the way I would try to do it.
All right. Well, that was our last question. Thanks to everyone who submitted questions. And do you have any final thoughts, Nick?
There was a question from last time on Psalm 58. Do you want to hit that one quick before we go?
Yeah.
So there was a question on Psalm 58 about, it says, how would one, or how do you personally right now pray through violent things in the Psalms? For instance, in Psalm 58, David is rejoicing in dipping his feet in the blood of the wicked, people who have been killed by God out of vengeance. And this is stated as a good example of how God judges the wicked people on earth. I'm not sure how to rejoice in something like this. Your thoughts, right? The other really famous one is Psalm 137, where the author says, happy is the ones, talking about two of the neighboring tribes who are particularly vindictive when the exile happened, in like rejoicing and punishing the people of Israel when they were being destroyed by the Babylonians. They say, happy are those who take the heads of your children and smash them against the stones. And you're like, oh, that sounds particularly bad.
Yeah.
Right.
That's rough.
All right. Because this is also really complicated, I'm gonna sort of read an answer here too, and you guys can comment on it. So, okay. First, we should recognize that we deserve and the wicked deserve a violent end. We often don't think that way, but we, as members of the wicked and the wicked, actually deserve a violent end. So there's nothing inherently wrong with a violent end coming to the wicked. We are not people of peace, that is Christians, because violence is not deserved or warranted. That's not why we're people of peace. For the wicked, violence and a violent end is deserved and warranted, right? We don't execute that, but it's not because it's not deserved, okay? Second, we should not live, we should note that we live in a very geopolitically different situation. National tribalism and the global relations between nation states in the present are very different. So the world David lived in which you had these neighboring tribes that were a few miles apart, that almost every spring would go to war with each other, right? They would steal each other's crops. They would enslave each other's wives. They would kill each other's children. And there was no UN. There was no, right? Like, this is what life was like. The way you look at the destruction of your enemies in that context is a fundamental mechanism of survival. They keep hounding you. They want to rape your wife. They're going to kill your children. They're going to steal your lands. And like, they have no compunction about it. And this is reality for you. That's very different than us like being angry at the Chinese.
Yeah.
Do you understand?
Yeah.
So like, you have to like put yourself into that context a little bit. So for example, if you just go back to the Napoleonic times, like 1805 to 1815, these same sentiments in Psalm 58 were very just in conflicts that were leading to the senseless death of millions. Or think of just World War II. Like, if you were an American soldier and you read Psalm 58 before you went into battle at Metz in Germany, would you have been morally justified to say, God, let me like bathe in the blood of my German enemies?
Yeah.
Because they are slaughterers and ruiners of mankind. Like, you see, part of the reason why we don't connect with Psalm 58 is because we have nothing to connect it to.
Yeah.
We have not been raped and pillaged and murdered. We have not experienced that. But the Psalms are for everybody.
Yeah.
And so many people in human history they're having them right now.
Yeah.
And there are situations in which saying what David says in Psalm 58 is very legitimate, right? Even if we're lovers of peace. Okay. It may be that we have just never been in such conflicts, but many millions of people have, and they need Psalms. The content of the Psalms are universal. Last, in conflict, we have to be humble, but also believe that our cause is just and fight as though it is just. Our hope may well be that the enemy will not come back next summer because they were so soundly defeated that we bathed in their blood. So for example, if you read St. Bede's Anglo-Saxon Chronicles, so he's covering the time in England between, I don't know, like 1820 and 1890 or whatever. So this was the time period where the Anglo-Saxons were the main people in England and the Nordic people were coming in like literally every summer, right? And they just like every summer, the Vikings would come and they would burn and they would pillage and they would steal. The only thing that you could do so that the Vikings wouldn't come back is if you had beaten them so soundly that you bathed in their blood. Bathing in your enemy's blood in this kind of military context is a metaphor for the fact they're not coming back next year. You are going to have some kind of reprieve. Like most military conflicts in the history of the world are non-decisive, right? There's like 400,000 people in the Napoleonic Wars come against 340,000, 40,000 people die. One group retreats, they readjust. It's non-decisive. Right. And so there's just more and more war and more and more war. If something happens where like the Russians came in and totally obliterated Napoleon's army, there's no war for a little while.
Yeah.
So bathing in the blood of your enemies or dashing their children against the stones, what it means is at least for a generation.
Yeah.
They will not come to kill, slaughter, pillage, and rape your families.
Yeah.
Right. So like when you like understand that, one, be thankful you live in America, for God's sake. Like even though like the UN sucks and NATO sucks and China sucks and we suck and everybody's so scared because like 15 years ago things seemed more stable than they seem right now. Like, for God's sakes, like read War and Peace, like read the Wars of the this is still a charmed moment. And this is why you shouldn't be like politically activists because we don't want to lose this moment.
Yeah.
It's fragile. Like we have to make wise decisions. But like if you read Psalm 58, you're like, oh my gosh, like I can't even. Okay, just realize it's because you have a very narrow human experience.
Yeah.
A very narrow human experience.
That makes sense.
And God loves people who have had these experiences.
Yeah.
He saves people who have had these experiences. He calls to people who have had these experiences. And some of these people who've been in these experiences, who have been the blood, the people where the blood came from, and people who have bathed in the blood of their enemies. Some of these people will be in heaven.
Yeah.
And we have to like grapple with this in a way that we understand that. And see, if you start with the fact that there's something right about this psalm, and there's a reason why this is in the Bible, it will broaden and deepen you. Instead of being reductive, like, well, that's wrong, that sounds wrong, politically wrong. No, I can't think about that. Stop. Go back 3,000 years.
Yeah.
Read the narrative books in the Bible. Listen to what those wars were like. Listen to like all the people that just came again and again and again, how every year the Philistines stole everything. And then think about what would you have prayed?
Yeah.
All your best friends have died. You've been wounded in battle twice. All you want is 1 year with peace and quiet.
Yeah.
And the Philistines are coming back with iron swords when you're still fighting with bronze. Like what would you pray?
Mm-hmm.
And what would you rejoice in if it happened? Bathing in the blood of your enemies is what you would rejoice in. Quit pretending that's not true.
Yeah, I think the saying that the Bible was written for you but not to you can be applied in this situation too.
Yes.
That's good.
Yeah, there's a hermeneutical jump is what we would call it technically, right?
Yeah.
It's like this is right in its context.
In its context.
But that doesn't mean that we're not peacemakers now. That doesn't mean that we don't want to take up swords. We don't want to take up swords against anybody, right?
Yeah.
It's the reason David couldn't build the temple. He was a man of blood. And not just when he had to. David had used violence when he shouldn't have. That's one of the reasons why. Because Solomon killed people, but he still was the one who built the temple.
Yeah.
Right? So David was a man after God's own heart. He also was a murderer.
Yeah.
Both of those were true. And so God used David massively. He also didn't let him build his temple. Because there was something about David he couldn't associate with his worship, even though most of the worship songs in the Bible were written by that guy.
That's
Isn't
fascinating.
that strange?
That's so strange.
But that's how God is nuanced about this.
Yeah.
God is willing to work through every context and judge it based on that context, still by these universal truths that he teaches, which is why we can know exactly how to get in heaven. Believe on the name of the Lord Jesus and be saved. And still God says, don't judge anybody.
Yeah.
Even though I've given you like 100% objective criteria for salvation, you still don't get to judge anybody.
Yeah.
Because all those nuances that you can't possibly understand, I understand. And I will judge every person. Which I think is fascinating and incredible.
Yeah.
That God is like, look, if you want to know how to be saved, if that's what you really care about, how can you be set right with me? Not so you can judge the whole world, so that you can be set right with me.
Yeah.
Jesus the Christ died for your sins and he rose for your justification. And if you put your trust in him, you'll be united with him in faith, justified and made right with me forever.
Yeah.
But if you want to know if that person's saved, if you want to know if that country did the right thing, you're going to have to wait on that.
I have to wait on that. That's a great ending. All right. Yeah. All right. Thank you, Nick. Thank you, Preston.
You're welcome. We'll see you next time.
See you next time.